I said, is there any evidence for the Exodus here? And they said, so far not. A cold chill came into the room. If the waters didn't part, did the stone roll away? I didn't know how big this story was going to become and how big it really is.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us today, Tim. Super excited to talk to you. What made you passionate about making faith-based films that show evidence for the Bible?
Well, I think it goes back to being interested in the arts for me. I was a musician growing up. My mother played the piano, and she tried to teach me, and that wasn't going to happen. I just could not get taught by my mom. But my uncle was a guitar player, and so he got me interested, and I definitely was interested in guitar, and that led me to play a lot of other instruments. And I traveled. When I was 16, I left home twice to be in music groups. And on the road and, in a bus and all that. And after doing that, I realized I don't think I want to be a musician on the road. And I got more interested in radio. So I went to college, went to a Christian college, and took a 2-year degree. And right kind of at the end of that, I heard a radio commercial about a film school. And I just started to go to the cinema, and I saw a movie by the Billy Graham Association called The Hiding Place. And that film really impacted my life. It was a Dutch family that was saving Jewish people, hiding them in their home. And eventually they got caught. And the entire family died except for Corrie ten Boom, who was released kind of on a clerical error. And she would live to tell the story of The Hiding Place. And they made a book of it, and then eventually the movie. Anyway, that idea of cinema really impacted me. And when I heard that this ad on a radio station for a school that had film school, I thought, wow, could that even be a possibility? And that began the journey into the cinema and the power of that. And as we can see today, people are looking at, media everywhere. And it's the increase. I don't even know if anyone's ever really thought about it, but the increase of people having their face stuck to in front of a screen has just like skyrocketed. And so
Yeah.
I think it's a really powerful media.
Yeah, that's incredible. You mentioned that you went to Egypt at one point because you were, I guess, having a question of faith and there being evidence specifically for the Exodus, because that was where it started for you. You met with a famous archaeologist there and you got some bad news, but
yeah, that
prompted you to explore some of these things. Am I right in that?
Yeah, absolutely. The adventure for me was that eventually, when we think about a career, I had something. I think a lot of us have like there's a pulling to something, whether it's sports or writing and for me, it was both my faith and it was also making films. And I love the concept of that. And I did eventually go on this big investigation in 2002 to Egypt and went to the very location where the Israelites were said in the Bible and where some people speculated that that's where they lived. And when I got there, I was told, and I didn't know all the backstory here, but I was told, I said, is there any evidence for the Exodus here? And they said, so far not. That wasn't the whole story. But that did cause a crisis of faith in my life. I didn't know when I started investigating this that there's a lot of scholars that were suggesting or basically stating that they didn't believe that the stories in the Bible were true. And there's a fundamental reason of which this first film that I started to dive into, which took 12 years of my life and a lot of other people's life to make. Yeah, it was a long process, and we ended up looking for, I think, what would be a scientific approach to looking for things, which is looking for a pattern, and that began the whole concept of patterns of evidence.
Okay.
And so if the Bible says something happens, can you see a pattern of evidence for somewhere in the archaeology or in history?
My goodness. I know you mentioned a book. I think it was a book by David Rohl. You had this moment. Yeah. You felt defeated. You went home. And you had a book on your bookshelf that really sort of opened up the possibility that there might be a different timeline that Egyptologists weren't considering that would make the biblical pattern fit. We would see archaeological evidence for the Exodus. But when I see that and the way you presented it in your film, I just, I wonder, like, what was that like for you? I mean, feeling devastated, how did you recover from that?
It was actually a supernatural moment where I basically I would often have to come in on the weekends to work on this project because it required me to just do traditional advertising and marketing, commercials and that on the weekdays. And this project was just, I was trying to understand it. And so I came in on a Saturday and I was looking at the footage by myself in an edit suite. And I'm looking at what it was Manfred Bitek, the Egyptologist, and I was like struggling, and I literally started to get emotional about it, almost cry, and just say, God, you have to explain this to me. Why is this man saying there's no evidence for the Exodus here? And I felt this, it was like a cold chill came into the room off to my left. And I think maybe a lot of other people might have had this where they come to a place and I feel like I fell into this pit, and then almost like within a few seconds, this other thought came from the other side. It was almost like one on this side, one on this side. This one was, stop editing, get up, go to your office. I got up, walked to my office, and I got into my office and said, go to the bookcase. It was that clear in my mind. I walked to the bookcase, and then it was like, read that book. I looked, and there was a book, which is the David Rohl book, which had been given to me probably a year or a year and a half earlier. And I have lots of books. I've got 6 bookcases of I collect lots of archaeology and history and, books. So I hadn't read it. And I opened it up, and right there was the very dig site that I was looking at in the edit suite.
Wow.
I opened up, and there was Manfred Bitek. So I've experienced this both supernatural experience, both of something dark, and it was like a cold presence, and then this other, sense to go. And I think that I say that to say that it is a spiritual battle, information and story, and what is the true story. I was on then, I looked at it and go, I have to go to where this man is, so I was like, all right, I'm going. And if I had to find out where
that's how you met David.
That's how I met him in the south of England, I believe it was.
Wow.
And just said, I got to go. And that began the beginning of me starting the investigation. But part of the challenge was that it took me a while for me to mature as a filmmaker to get to a place where we could tell a story and unravel it, as it were.
All of your films have made a huge impact. The one that I was surprised by the most was the Moses controversy. I can't help but wonder, like, the difference what you're doing is making in hundreds or thousands of other lives. Have you heard feedback from people about the work that you're doing?
I think that I was supposed to make certain films, and there's a verse in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. It talks about we're Christ's workmanship, and he's prepared good works for us to do before the beginning of time. Paraphrase there. And I think that I felt that there was a sense of direction, maybe a sense of destiny, and I didn't know what it was. But I think that all of us, I would share with your audience, is that God's prepared things for us to do. What happens is in this world, it's really easy to get distracted from them, the things you're supposed to be doing, to tell yourself that I don't think it's possible, or to just have unbelief. And I battled with that when I was, in earlier times, is this even possible? Or am I really supposed to be doing this? And I feel uncomfortable many times, in the early days, with making a film, because it's a lot of work and you're trying to say, is there something here? But I knew after the Exodus that before I could go to the Red Sea journey, and I know you've been to the Middle East and you've been to Nueva and you've been to these locations, I've been to quite a few of them myself. I felt that there was so much criticism about the fact that Moses didn't really write the first books of the Bible. And the reason why that was significant to kind of nail that down is because Jesus says that Moses wrote them.
Right.
Listen, when I've had debates with scholars who basically discredit the authorship of Moses, they also, with a little wink in their eye, realized that Jesus didn't know what he was talking about. See, they don't believe, they see the two are connected. And I don't know that a lot of people understand that that's where it leads. If we end up discrediting Moses and his authorship, then we discredit an awful lot of other things in the Bible because it's foundationally built upon that. And once again, I said I'm not a seminary student or an archaeologist, but I'm a logical filmmaker, investigative filmmaker, and I look at the logic of things. In fact, the films are created through what we call dramatic logic, and then we dramatize logic, and that's the reason why you see the Wall of Time, you see the connections, and then I just do lots of research. I have on staff a full-time researcher for 15 years.
That's incredible. And I think you make a good point too, just about what true faith is. The fact that you went and researched some of these things, that's part of the faith journey and what it is. That's what you were going through. And you come out of those things stronger, right? I mean, your faith is built up, if anything.
Yeah. We actually wrote this book called The Evidence of Faith. It was when it came out of the Exodus, it seemed like I wanted to create something. And Robert Nolan, who's written a lot of books, I wrote a bit of this. Steve Law, the researcher, did, who my writing partner, and then Robert. He goes, no matter what happens, he says, I have to do this. He really felt like he was being led to write this book. This is a really good book for anyone, The Evidence of Faith.
Okay.
They go to patternsofevidence.com. They can get it out of the store. But these are, as the Bible has all of these different types, and so what I think I've been called to do more as an artistic filmmaker, a prophetic filmmaker, in the sense of seeing things that don't exist. I think that's been my calling, my gift, is that I can see I can see things, I can see the pattern. And I think that's been the gift that I have been given, is that I see a pattern. I have a sense that there's a pattern there. There's something. So the Moses controversy, I had heard that there was this early alphabet, and we ended up bringing in scholars who were talking about that. And the hard part was, do we exactly know what it says? Because there's different ways to interpret it because of the way that you could. There aren't any, when you look at these early forms of the alphabet, they show up in the very same place that the Israelites, that we see them showing up and around that time. And the problem has been for so many people that are critical of the Bible is they want to put the Israelites at a time when I don't believe, and a lot of other people don't believe they were there. If you stick with the Bible and you stick with, some of the arguments that show why it has to be in this location at this time in history, then it fits together. And that's why the films are visual. And we try not to basically put anybody into a headlock. We basically say, listen, here's the pattern. It's up, if you don't believe it, that's fine. But there is a pattern here. How do you explain that?
Why do you think the trustworthiness of the Bible, why is it more important now than ever? That next generation is coming up after us. And why is it so important that we leave them just with these basic truths that you're communicating through your films?
I've been studying a lot about what's happening with how we see the world. And the issue has to do with, as a storyteller, you have the opportunity and the responsibility to create your own center of good, your own moral, framework, as it were. And what's happened is that we were living, when we were younger, in a culture and a society that had a center of good that was pretty much vertical. I mean, it was, we knew what absolute truth was, and we knew what morality was, and there was a moral center to that. And what's happened is that the center of good has been shifting, and we're creating a lot of story today that is actually that we don't have heroes, the type that we should have, and we're creating mythologies about the past and the future. A lot of sci-fi mythologies about, for example, Dune is out right now, and we come to love these sci-fi fantasy films. We think about Star Wars, Dune, and all those are actually, we believe they exist, but they really don't. There is actually nothing that can be documented, but it's a mythology that people believe will come in the future. They have an enormous amount of faith that someday there'll be a Star Trek Enterprise and that there will be a Star Wars world, and they believe that. And so what ends up happening is that that is a mythology that's been created by the imagination of people. But I also think that those imaginations are inspired because we're living in a spiritual world. The Bible tells us that the mythologies, also the past. When I just went to Italy and Rome, and they had a pantheon of stories behind those gods, Hercules, and the Greek gods had them, and throughout all the world there are gods. And what Moses in the Exodus tells us in Deuteronomy, it says that the Ten Commandments came and says, you are to worship no other gods, with a small g.
Yeah.
And so why this is interesting is that you're seeing more supernatural activity towards characters like the Marvel characters having superpowers. And I think that what's happening is the spiritual world is trying to surface again and to reveal itself that it has power.
Wow. Huh.
And so what
that is a fascinating observation. And honestly, I never made that connection before, seeing how that manifests itself, I guess, through pop culture. A big thing for me has always been evolution, because I feel like, modern science has created a new narrative. Any suggestions on how someone could approach something like this faith journey that you've gone on without shipwrecking their faith, or in a way that builds faith for them?
Yeah, well, one of them is, I think there's just sort of basic fundamentals, which is to know your Bible. There's an enormous amount of Bible illiteracy going on. And the Bible is critical in the sense that you understand origin. If we just take basically the beginning of, in the beginning, God created something from nothing. Well, no origin stories other than the Bible began from nothing. It wasn't until just recently that science really uncovered that. And there's a new movie coming out called The Ark in the Darkness, which is going to give you a really good understanding of DNA and Eve. It's going to basically look at the languages and the Pangea that happened during the flood. So what's happening is that we have a lot of other stories here, but I believe that those stories, that the explosion of storytelling, if you think about 100 years ago, people didn't have, literally cinema was in its infancy. And what's happened in the short period of time is that we are being distracted and deceived about other narratives that aren't really the truth. And the Bible talks about, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So what's happening here is that I believe that there's an acceleration to deceive people. In the book of Revelation, I've been working with another filmmaker out of France, and the Bible says that eventually Satan will be, captured and bound, and he'll no longer deceive the nations. So, when I was in that edit suite and the thought came into my mind, everything your family has believed is a lie. Well, that's happening all over. Satan and his demonic horde, and I believe there are demons. I think I haven't scientifically studied it, but I think there's enough proof. In fact, there is some science, behind a lot of this, that there is a spiritual world. There's a new book that just came out, or not a book, but a movie came out called After Death. So going back to, well, if you're a young person, you need to know that who you are, and that you're created in the image of God. And I think the challenge we have with so many people being confused about their sex orientation and all that comes because they really don't know who they are. And they're hearing all these different mythologies and ideologies that are really disturbing. So what I would say is that I know that when you're at a certain age, you're only mature enough to, to take in so much. So that's one of the challenges, is that I found that at the age that I am now, I can understand and conceptualize things that are a little bit deeper. I have a different maturity level than a younger person. But I think basically understanding, like you're talking about, origin. And one of the things that I saw with the Exodus narrative, which was saying there's no evidence for this. I had a girl contact me when I was at a group called Ratio Christi, and she was a freshman at a college, and she tapped me from behind and said, "Excuse me," and I turned around and she says, "Can I tell you my story?" And she was from another religion, and so she then came to America, went to this college that she thought was a Christian college, and they were teaching Bible. Because she was hungry. She was a new Christian. And the Bible professor said that we don't think that there are any, any evidence for the Exodus, and we don't know that it's true. And she went back to her dorm distraught. She said, why did I become a Christian if this isn't true? And someone at the dorm said, hey, have you heard of Patterns of Evidence? And they said, no. Well, it's on Netflix. You got to watch. And so she stayed up all night. She watched the Exodus, Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, took all sorts of notes, went to the class the next day, and went to her professor and said, you are wrong. He goes, what? He goes, there is an Exodus. You need to see Patterns of Evidence. And he goes, Patterns of Evidence? What's that? And so he ended up watching it. And you know what? He changed his class. And I think this girl went from walking away from her faith. And this is the thing, is that when you don't know, someone comes along and you basically have a situation where people give you a shot of unbelief, and it starts to get into your system, because you don't know. You're just a kid from high school. You go to college, and they're the ones who's supposed to know, and they tell you nothing of this is true. And that's exactly what's been happening. But I went to the top scholars, and I asked them the second and third and fourth questions, and I started to understand their positions. And that's the reason why we made those films, the Exodus and Moses controversy, because those professors don't have all the answers, and the answers they're giving are basically guardedly in one area. But if you ask the question outside that area, there's not an answer for that. And those answers are incomplete. And that's the reason why a pattern exists that they can't explain, but it's there. And then you ask the question, well, is your dating correct? How do you know? And what was interesting is that in the very, very beginning, when Champollion discovered the Rosetta Stone, and they were trying to figure out dating, and he was trying to read hieroglyphs. He connected a pharaoh in Egypt with a pharaoh in the Bible. And I actually have already filmed this scene in Egypt, but we don't believe that. I don't believe, and others, that he got that connection wrong, or right. So it is wrong. So what that means is that the Bible was used to establish Egyptian dating, but they probably got the wrong thing. And from that point on, Egyptian dating then was used to discredit the Bible.
Wow, that is unbelievable. What a testimony that is of that college student going to her professor. I just feel like it underscores this being foundational.
What I see in people who at one time were people of faith or grew up in a home of faith, and as they journey along, you have to make the relationship. You can have knowledge of God in your head, but you have to make it personal. And this is my message to people who might be watching this, is that you have to literally, I think in the book of Revelation, it says Jesus stands at the door, and then the Spirit of God will come into your life if you acknowledge him and confess your sin. And I have not talked much about the relationship with Jesus. I've really been in the Old Testament. But at the end of the day, what is happening is that if you understand that, and this, I'll get back to these guys, is that there's a big story here. And if you understand this, we're to come in on this story. If you understand in the very beginning that God brought all of this into existence, and we're in this dimension, but there is another dimension. There are other dimensions. I don't know how many there are, but we know that there's two-dimensional space, and then there's three-dimensional, and here we are with time as well. But there's something outside of time, and it says that God knows the future and the past, and he was and is to come. In the book of Revelations, it talks about that. So he is I am that I am, and he gave us the privilege of being created and gave us an opportunity through free will to acknowledge that he exists. And all you and I are trying to do is to say to people, there is an awful lot that we don't know, but is pointing to this God, and that there is a relationship that he's wanting us to have. And so that's the reason why there are great books like The Stones Cry Out, evidence for the Bible. If you're bent towards wanting to know about the archaeology, then this is a good book. Here's another friend of mine. This is Randall Price, and this is The Trowel and the Truth. As I said, the evidence of faith. There's just a lot of different good ways to work your way through getting yourself some bearing, so you understand why you exist. Because a lot of people are unsatisfied with their life because they don't know what their purpose is. And
Yeah.
if your purpose, if you don't have a purpose and don't have a sense of direction, your end can come from that primarily. Then you're trying to satisfy your life by your physical appetites and all the things like money, power, sex, prestige, all of that. And so anyway, that's sort of the big idea of why I became a filmmaker, is because I think I'm absolutely interested in origin, and I'm also interested in the future.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about that. And not to change the subject, but I know you're always looking for new ways to share the biblical narrative with people. And you're currently working on a project called The American Miracle. We've actually got a trailer queued up for that, and I'm going to play it for everybody right now.
I came to persuade you to avoid these dangers.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
We must find a path forward where they will have a future that's very different than their past.
He will become the founder of a mighty empire.
The fate of unborn millions now depends under God upon the conduct and courage of this army.
Americans of today should regain our bearings, that our nation is no accident.
I can't wait to see it in person. And I think if your other movies have shown us anything, this one is going to be fantastic. Tell us a little bit about what went into this and the contemporary narrative that America, it was meant to be a secular, nationalistic government that is free from any religious involvement. I think you'd have something to say about that.
I believe that religion was supposed to have freedom from government. And so what that is really what the Constitution allowed. It gave opportunity for people to have their conscience, their right of their conscience. And what's happening is that people we've lost the understanding of what the Constitution, the rights were. The only thing that holds all of these people together in 50 states with all sorts of different kinds of people is a constitution that the founders in many ways were inspired to. And I think that their inspiration also came from their understanding of biblical concepts such as the fallen nature of man. That's why they separated executive and judicial and legislative branches of government. They knew that people, they were created to be free. And in order to be free, they had to have certain rights that were inalienable. And so we're going to be, we're telling this story from really from the viewpoint of an awful lot of it's from George Washington and his life as a young man, because God supernaturally, in many cases, spared his life for him to lead the country and then to preside over the development of the Constitution, and we need to be reminded of that, because many people today, once again, I think, are misinformed and intentionally trying to distort the goodness of the founding and the goodness of the Constitution and what the nation is. And these professors that have been sowing seeds of unrest and revolution really want a different world. They're globalists, I believe, and they do not want to see a nation like America stand for the types of things that it has standed for. So I think the founders came from many, many different viewpoints religiously. So they were basically not trying to create a Christian nation, but a nation that would allow Christianity in its conscience of whether you're Catholic or Lutheran or Protestant. They all had different views about what it was supposed to be. They just didn't want the government interfering with their religious practice. And so that's what I've been learning in this process. And I think that's why this film is an important film. And not only that, but everybody that's a citizen. We've just allowed in millions of people to become a part of a nation that they know nothing about the agreement, because the people that are here now don't know what the agreement is. And when you don't know what the agreement is, you take it all for granted. And that's when people are trying to cut the roots out of the very thing that holds this nation together. And that's why it's important for us to go back and understand from, where we came from and why,
Yeah.
and what the virtue of it all is.
Amen. Amen. I'm definitely with you there. A student of history. My father got me into history, but this is a drama. This is a historical drama, right? It's a little different than the documentaries that you've produced.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've got a little brochure right here. But yes, we are. I got involved and asked to be a part of a book called The American Miracle by Michael Medved. And we were able to put together a great team and started filming it this last year. And it's got a big cast, probably about 80 people in the cast, about 300, 400 extras. And it's about, once again, the origin of the nation. And what happened in that origin is that there was something they called providence. And providence was the presence of God, was meant to be. There was something that people could observe that was in favor of the people who came here. They had a sense of providence, a sense of destiny that God was directing and helping this nation to come into existence.
Fantastic. Well, what's the release date on this, and how can people stay connected with you?
Yeah, AJ, thank you. There's two ways. One of them is patternsofevidence.com. Each week we give out thinkers articles, which are going to be videos, and they're going to have archaeology information on them. We have hundreds of thousands of people that receive them every week. And when new movies are coming out, we have a store there with all sorts of films of ours and others and books that you can get. We have homeschool curriculum for some of this material. And then American Miracle Movie, brand new for me too, .com is where they can sign up for more information now that's coming out. We're going to be making videos and podcasting and letting everyone know the movie's coming out in 2025, and it will be a big deal. And I don't think anybody's created a movie like this that has this kind of testimony of God acting in our history.
Fantastic. I love it. I'm excited to see it myself. That's a topic I'm passionate about. And any other ventures you may be working on or areas you may be exploring?
Well, I'm working on one other one called The Israel Dilemma, which is going to be about, what's going on from a historical standpoint of this land. Who does it belong to? We've got the Palestinian-Israeli conflict going on, and we're going to explore that and the covenant that God made with the people of Israel. And so that we say, well, what is the Israel dilemma at? Well, I think it's kind of like the Moses controversy in the sense it's not a film that I normally would have picked, but it's a film about how are we going to react to this crisis, and where does the biblical text point to, and what do we see? And I'm going to give you the different viewpoints, and it'll help you to possibly know how you should think and react in the future.
Wow, wonderful, man. Well, Tim, that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Check out some of Tim's movies. I'll tell you what, I think they will encourage your faith. I think they will even help you to become a better evangelist, like that college student we heard about earlier. So just super cool stuff. So thankful for you, Tim. God bless you, my friend, and thank you so much.
Thank you, AJ. God bless you too.
Some incredible encouragement from filmmaker Tim Mahoney. If you haven't done so already, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel, but also to go to PastorAJ.com, where you can become an official partner of this ministry, a subscriber to my weekly email newsletter, and you can even pick up my latest book, End Times Mission, An Introduction to Postmillennial Eschatology. I'm telling you, it's worth it. With that, stay encouraged and silence those doubts, because you know that the Bible is true.